The law is not reason, but the will of power disguised in a wig. Welcome to the Criminal Imagination. This series, Crime and Civilization, begins with a simple question. What if the true purpose of law is not justice but control? Across centuries, crime fiction has recorded the political fears of its age, from cursed kings and cunning thieves to corrupt judges and silent witnesses. Each episode investigates how power operates through narrative, what it hides, who it condemns, and what happens when the system turns inwards and begins to devour itself. Today we turn to the year 1742, to Henry Fielding's up- uproarious and biting novel, Joseph Andrews. More than a comedic tale of misadventure, Joseph Andrews is a barbed commentary on law, power, and class masquerading as local justice. On the Criminal Imagination, we explore crime fiction not merely as a catalogue of villains and investigators, but as a deep register of how societies understand justice, guilt, and institutional power. That's why today we have chosen a book that might seem like an odd fit for the genre at first glance, Joseph Andrews by Henry Fielding. But it is not odd at all. In fact, Joseph Andrews is one of the earliest and most subversive examples of what we now call crime fiction and its tool of subversion, satire. Fielding was not just a novelist, he was also a magistrate. He had seen firsthand the yawning gap between the law's noble ideals and the farcical way it was often enforced. In Joseph Andrews, he doesn't write a detective or a murder plot. Instead, he stages a theatrical world of false accusations, corrupt justices, sleeping constables, and drunken squires, turning the machinery of law itself into a spectacle. What is being investigated here is not the individual crime, but the systematic absurdity of those tasked with judging it. This is the essence of why satire belongs in the crime fiction tradition. Satire is a genre of exposure. Crime fiction is the genre of transgression. Together, they reveal not just who committed wrong, but why the system keeps permitting it. In Joseph Andrews, we meet characters like Squire Frolick, who rules his rural court with wine in hand and books upside down, or magistrates who judge cases based on social status rather than evidence. These figures are not exaggerations, they are indictments. Fielding is not ridiculing people, he is ridiculing power. And through laughter, he confronts us with something deadly serious, the farce of rural justice in 18th century England. In modern crime fiction, this tradition survives in writers like Kafka, Orwell, and Heller, where the courtroom has become a theater and justice a stage performance. Joseph Andrews stands at the beginning of that line. It is not a detective novel, it is something older and more foundational, a comic reckoning with the failure of law. So, if we ask, why Joseph Andrews on a crime fiction channel? Our answer is simple, because this book doesn't just narrate crime, it exposes the comedy of those who claim to judge it. And in doing so, it makes us ask the most important question in all of crime fiction: what happens when justice becomes a joke? To begin, let's recall the larger project. Crime fiction is never only about the crime, it is about the institutions that define it. Monarchy, capitalism, colonialism, the courts, jail, gallows, all of these, visible or not, haunt every page. The genre evolves in tandem with the modern state. Every detective is a bureaucrat, every criminal a counter political agent, every trial a test of legitimacy. So, the role of petty authority and the squirearchy is questioned here. The local landowning class who administered justice in 18th century England is analyzed here. Through the farcical episode of Squire Justice Frolick, Fielding squares not only the incompetence of rural law but its complicity in maintaining class hierarchies. Before we meet Squire Justice, we must meet his creator, Henry Fielding. He was not just a novelist, he was a barrister, playwright, and critically a London magistrate. He knew the legal system from both sides, the courtroom and the quill. His early plays were satirical, mocking political corruption, but after the 1737 Licensing Act, which censored the stage, Fielding turned to fiction. His novels Shamila, Joseph Andrews, and Tom Jones became weapons of satire, exposing hypocrisy across all social strata. By the 1740s, Fielding was presiding over cases in Bow Street, where he and his brother John helped found the Bow Street Runners, the precursors to modern police. He saw firsthand the brutalities and farces of the English law, and in Joseph Andrews he mocks them with surgical precision. Joseph Andrews begins as a parody of Samuel Richardson's Pamela, a sentimental novel in which a virtuous maid resists the advances of her master. Fielding flips the premise. Here it is Joseph, Pamela's brother, who must fend off the unwanted advances of a predatory lady, Booby. But the parody evolves into something far more expansive, a sprawling, picturesque journey through England's roads, inns, churches, and courtrooms. Alongside Parson Adams, Joseph meets beggars, rogues, philosophers, and officials. Each encounter is a moral examination. What emerges is a vision of society where virtue is less rewarded than wealth, and where justice is dictated not by principle but by rank. Nowhere is this clearer than in this episode of Squire Justice Frolick, a rural magistrate who personifies the absurdity of local power. After Joseph is beaten and robbed, he and Parson Adams seek help from the local authorities. But what they find is not order, it is theatre. Squire Justice, a land-owning magistrate, conducts trial in his drawing room, often while drunk or asleep. His legal decisions are arbitrary, theatrical, and entirely dictated by class. The court is a parody of justice, resembling more a puppet stage than a tribunal. He calls for evidence with no seriousness, interrupts witnesses, sides immediately with the wealthy, and disregards any facts that inconveniences his bias. It is law as farce. The robe of justice conceals not reason but prejudice. This is not a side plot. It is Fielding's diagnosis of local government in the English countryside. These squires, many untrained in law, wielded real authority. They could issue warrants, impose fines, jail citizens. In a sense, they were law, and that Fielding tells us is the true crime. To understand this satire, we must understand the squirearchy, the landed gentry who governed rural England in the absence of a professional police or civil administration. In 18th century England, justices of the peace or JPs were often drawn from local elites. They were appointed by the crown. They oversaw petty sessions and administered local law. Yet, their education in legal theory was minimal. What they did possess was land, title, and the unquestioned respect of their inferiors. The result? A legal system shaped not by impartial courts but by patronage, favoritism, and social rank. Fielding's Justice Frolick is not merely a comic buffoon, he is a terrifying reality. He's a ca- he can ruin lives on a whim. His rulings are absurd, yet they hold real consequences. And because he mirrors the structure of rural justice so accurately, Fielding forces us to ask what happens when authority is inherited rather than earned? A crucial theme, and indeed in the whole novel, is the redefinition of crime. For Fielding, crime is not defined by its injury to the public but by its disruption of hierarchy. When Joseph is robbed, an actual crime, Justice Frolick shows no urgency. But when a lower class man speaks too confidently or a servant challenges a gentleman, the justice leaps into action. What is being punished is not law breaking but class breaking. This is central to Fielding's satire. Justice in rural England is not about protecting citizens, it is about protecting privilege. Crime is that which offends the social order, not the moral one. Fielding also skewers the absurd legal formalism of his day. The justice's trial is filled with pomp, declarations, procedures, ceremonial gestures, but all of this is hollow. The decisions were made before anyone entered the room. This hollowing out of legal ritual, form without substance, is a hallmark of a corrupt governance. It is also deeply modern. The trial becomes performance, the wig, the scroll, the hammer, symbols of law, but their function is symbolic only. Justice Frolick performs the law, but he does not dispense it. This idea resonates even now. The danger is not only in the broken laws, but in functioning procedures that serve no justice. And here lies the paradox of Fielding himself. For all his satire, Fielding was not an anarchist. He did not wish to abolish law, but to reform it. After Joseph Andrews, he would go on to write legal pamphlets advocating for professional magistracy, prison reform, and the creation of a police force. In 1749, as a magistrate, he helped establish the Bow Street Runners, a salaried force to investigate crime. He was one of the earliest advocates for separating judicial function from landowning privilege. So, why satire? Because Fielding knew the law could not reform itself from the bench, it had to be exposed from the below. Laughter becomes a weapon. When the system is this absurd, ridicule is not just art, it is resistance. Let us pause and consider how this fits into a larger theme. Because Fielding has given us a vital insight that early modern law was less an institution than a performance. The courtroom was not a neutral space but a theater of class power. The judges' bench, the courtroom layout, even the language all signaled submission. Fielding's satire functions not to mock the law but to strip away its sacred aura. He reveals the machinery underneath. And he does through fiction, through character, through exaggeration, through comedy. The law is not above literature, it is literature. It tells stories to maintain order, and Fielding rewrites them. Though set in 18th century, the legacy is long. His character echoes in Dickens' Mr. Bumble, in Kafka's Faceless Clerks, in the absurd bureaucracy of Joseph K. in The Trial, and even in the contemporary portrayals of small town courts. Wherever power becomes petty and unaccountable, Frolic returns. He is a low level despot, the man with a stamp but no soul, and crucially, he believes in his own virtue. His buffoonery is dangerous precisely because it is sincere. He is the ancestor of bureaucratic violence, the paper tyrant. Alongside Justice Frolic, Fielding offers a contrast. Parson Adams. Adams is bumbling but morally serious. He embodies a kind of ideal justice uncorrupted by class, guided by scripture and reason, flawed but earnest. Fielding offers Adams not as a solution but as a conscience. He is not powerful but he is good. And in Fielding's world, that matters if only privately. Fielding's Joseph Andrews gives us more than laughter, it gives us a model. How fiction can challenge the institution that governs us. How satire can reveal not only the abuses of power but their cultural logic. Squire Justice is not an aberration, he is the system laid bare. And in exposing him, Fielding not only entertains, he indicts. He invites us to ask not only what crime is, but who defines it, who enforces it, and to what end. Because every farce of justice is still justice for someone and a sentence for someone else. And so, here is my question to you. If satire exposes the absurdity of power, can a society truly reform its justice system without first laughing at its hypocrisies? Tell me in the comments. Until next time, this is the criminal imagination. Remember, when the law becomes laughter, justice must speak in whispers.